In our Gospel reading today, we hear of Jesus confirming the greatest of the commandments. They are perhaps old hat. They are perhaps so familiar that we take them for granted. To love God and to love our neighbour as ourselves. They're almost a cliche. But for the commandment to love our neighbour as we would love ourselves to be more than a cliche with little to no impact on our lives, we need to cast a very critical eye. We need to cast a critical eye on the prevailing myth in our culture. That is the myth of the independent individual. We should note how much of our culturally induced self-understanding, in fact, relies on this fiction. There is no such thing as a completely independent individual. The ideal seems to be a heroic fantasy based on the denial of our own vulnerability. But each of us exists because of other people, and not just in terms of our conception. We would not have survived infancy and early childhood without the care of others. It may be obvious, but who we are physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, all of this is because of other people and in relation to other people. And it's not just who we are, but everything that we have and use is based upon the work of other human beings. The myth of the heroic individual creating success by his or her own efforts alone denies the facts of our interdependence. The American dream, well, all the cultural myths that blind us to the reality of our dependence on other human beings runs the risk of also blinding us to the most important reality of all, and that is our dependence on God. Christian liturgy sometimes refers to worship, and indeed the whole Christian life, as a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving. But what do we mean today when we say that we offer a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving to God? What self-understanding, what habits, what attitudes do we surrender when we offer ourselves as a holy and living sacrifice to God? Is our sacrifice, in fact, even a celebration? In a society that more and more focuses on personal happiness as being defined by external criteria, by wealth, by possessions, by status, by power, how do we understand ourselves as Christians? What is it that's required of us as members of the Christian community? What do we gain by being part of such a community? And what do we lose? A unifying theme across the Gospels, and indeed much of the rest of the Bible, is that of the living God. Through the eternal Spirit, Christ offered himself to purify our conscience from dead works to worship the living God, as the Epistle to the Hebrews puts it. This offers an understanding of how to respond to the challenges facing us today. Christ's sacrifice means that our God is a living God. He is with us throughout all that ails and challenges us. Our secular society surrounds us and tempts us with a myriad of dead works. Unlike the dead gods whose worship leads ultimately to disappointment and despair, our God is alive and present to us every single moment, offering us forgiveness and enduring salvation, and if nothing else, hope. And so the Christian community gathers in churches up and down the country, indeed around the world, and that worship comes with an invitation. When we worship together, we are again invited to praise and thank God for all that he has given us, for our lives and all that they bring, for his Son, and for the ongoing sustenance for each of us through the holy gift of the Eucharist. But how do we give thanks? We give thanks by following his commandments. The law, you see, is not a burden to us. Following those commandments is not a burden. It releases us to most fully be the people that God has called us to be, by loving him and also by loving each other, to recognize in each other the echo of the divine. And when we do that, We too, as it was put in the Gospel according to St. Mark, we too will not be far from the kingdom